heart of where innovation, money, and power collide in Silicon Valley and beyond. This is Bloomberg Technology with Caroline Hyde and Ed Ludlow.
I'm Caroline Hyde at Bloomberg's world headquarters in New York.
I'm Ed Ludlow in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg Technology.
Coming up, Microsoft to invest $1.5 billion in a UAE top AI firm. It's G42. That's as the US government pushes the Abu Dhabi business to end all cooperation with China. We analyze the business and the political drivers.
Europe has its eye on fintech and crypto. We sit down with the EU's Commissioner for Financial Services on her visit to Silicon Valley as AI is all the rage in bank earnings.
And we digest a $250 million fundraise for a Silicon Valley chip developer, Rivos, which is yet to bring about its first product. We discuss the race for AI infrastructure and so much more throughout this hour. We focus, though, just on the public markets, which in the United States, relatively sanguine right now. The Nasdaq is off just by about 1/4%. The action is actually what's happening in Asia and Europe trading. Both those benchmarks under a lot of pressure following some sell-off that we've seen in the US. But really what's been happening also in the bond market. Yields up 3 basis points on a 2-year yield that at one point was very close to the 5% level. We're all eyes on Jay Powell, what he sees for the future of Fed policy when we still got such a resilient US economy and inflationary pressures. Moving on, have a look at what's happening in the world of as a dollar that rises for 5 straight days and having the best run in at least a year. The Bitcoin on the flip side versus the US dollar is down 1.7%. We're at $62,000. So there's still some risk aversion in this market, Ed, when it comes to certain risk assets. We're looking on the micro.
I'm continuing to look at Tesla. This is a 2-day chart. The stock down another 4%. We broke the news yesterday that the job cuts at Tesla will be nearer to 20%. Elon Musk's memo said more than 10%. We also broke the story that Drew Baglino, an 18-year veteran and one of 4 named executives, had resigned. He then confirmed it on social media. The milestone is that Tesla's now below $500 billion of market cap. There's a lot of questions. We're going to ask some of them throughout this week, throughout this quarter, about what comes next for the EV name. Also looking at Microsoft, up 0.5 percentage point, had a slow start to the session. The headline on news is the $1.5 billion investment in G42. There's a backstory, which, as you know, I've been looking into for a few months. G42 really likes what Sam Altman and OpenAI are doing. I think they want a piece of that. They now have a relationship with Microsoft. I wonder if that helps. And the backstory is a political one as well, that G42 is now safe for a US company to invest in. It's very complicated, but it's a name we're going to hear more and more about.
Certainly, and let's get straight to it. Microsoft and the deal, Bloomberg's Dean Abbas. You come of this, of course, with the Microsoft expertise covering all things of that business. But just take a step back. I mean, what had to happen first? What led to the divestment of China, the move away from China?
Sure. So what a bunch of Bloomberg reporters, including Ed, some of my other colleagues, have been tracking for a while is that there have been these behind-the-scenes secret talks between the U.S. government and G42. And what we reported last night is that resulted in kind of a secret pact that was reached in which G42 agreed to divest from China. Remember, G42 was under a lot of criticism from U.S. government, from some members of Congress for its close ties to some Chinese companies, including Huawei. And they were under threat that they might not be able to continue to have access to the key NVIDIA chips that they need for their AI work. This kind of, secret pact resolves all of that and eased the way for this Microsoft deal.
Dina, I think it's worth explaining to our audience what G42 is. It's essentially an investment firm. But in all the conversations I have, G42 comes up a lot in the context of the Sam Altman chip initiative. We've reported that, Sam Altman has met with G42, that G42 wants to give him lots of money. But I don't think we've ever stopped and said, what's G42?
Sure. It's essentially, the biggest AI company in that region, in the UAE and in large parts of that part of the world. It's a holding company that's focused on AI, but it has its hands in a lot of different parts of AI. There's significant healthcare initiatives that it's working on in artificial intelligence. For Microsoft, this is a multi-stage deal, and they want to take advantage of several parts of what G42 offers them. including Microsoft President Brad Smith told us yesterday. In a later stage of the deal, they're hoping to put Microsoft services in G42's data centers and use that as a way to access markets in Central Asia and Africa, where Microsoft doesn't really have a presence and doesn't have its own data centers. So that's another role that G42 plays, sort of, easing the speed of cloud and AI into some of those regions where U.S. companies don't really have access. That's part of the reason why the Biden administration wanted to make sure that it removed G42 from the Chinese sphere of influence and got closer to U.S. technology companies and the U.S. technology industry.
Bloomberg's Dina Bass, one of the bylines on what is one of the most read stories and important pieces of reporting on Bloomberg this Tuesday. We've had the reporting and the details. Let's get some more analysis and reaction with Dan Ives of Wedbush. And Dan, you kind of cover this from Microsoft's perspective, but you've written a few notes about the bigger picture as well with what's happening with OpenAI and AI infrastructure build out. Just give us your kind of scorecard on this Redmond UAE tie-up.
Oh, I mean, this is a massive strategic bet. It's another flex the muscles for Redmond and Nadella. Because really for G42, they had a choice, China or US and Redmond. And you're going to take Microsoft every day of the week right now, along with NVIDIA. And for Microsoft, it's just another doubling it down. They're playing chess. Others are playing checkers.
Dan, Microsoft is forming a lot of relationships with a lot of different people. Are they just making sure they're covered, basically?
Well, look, Ed, they know they're way ahead. So what they're doing is they're putting the guardrails up really around the world. So any blind spot, Middle East being one of them, they're going to bet on the big horse right here. And they ultimately even had to divest the Chinese piece, also making sure that within the Beltway 202 area code, there's no issues there. So from Microsoft, this is an example. They're miles ahead. They're just further and further gaining share from an AI perspective, given this AI revolution where Altman, the golden child of AI, resides.
Dan, what's interesting is, in this case, US government played a role. In other areas, I think of just what happened last week with the UK CMA worrying from a regulatory perspective about certain key players having a web of relationships and them crossing over too much in the world of AI. Will this be regulated from a competition perspective?
Well, I think, look, Brad Smith knows it as well as anyone. He's going to proactively, in Microsoft, make sure US and Beltway are good with this, because they don't want all of a sudden a year, 18 months from now, this becomes a bigger issue. And they checked all those boxes. The Chinese divestiture, I think, was important from a G42 perspective. And now it's a green light going ahead. At the same time, where Amazon and Google still trying to play catch up. And this is Nadella just continuing to make aggressive bets. And we'll see it again in earnings, where they continue to be the lead from an AI perspective.
Phenomenal game of chess, as we sort of referenced. And what is on many players' minds right now is, where are the bottlenecks? Heard it time and time again from Sam Altman and many that it's to do with energy and it's to do with access to AI infrastructure. Is that what you hear from the leaders of these companies, and how much more investment are we likely to see to try and see a solution globally for that?
Yeah, and I think Ed nailed it when he was talking about on the chip side. There's a two-parter here, because I think this is ultimately going to lead from a chip perspective to more and more investment from Middle East towards some of the Altman and chip ventures that's now going on within OpenAI and Microsoft. Of course, energy continues to be the constraint, but as use cases are exploding across the board, and now this fourth industrial revolution's here, being led by Nadella and, of course, the godfather of AI, Jensen NVIDIA.
Love having the perspective. Dan Ives, who can make it a global conversation. We thank you from Wedbush. Meanwhile, let's just go to another key player that many keep an eye on, Apple. It's pledged to buy more components and accessories for its devices from Vietnam suppliers. Now, the move is a big boost for the Southeast Asian country. That's as it emerges as a global electronics hub. Apple is exploring ways to shift production, of course, of its gadgets away from China. That's to minimize those geopolitical risks. And the iPhone maker is exploring India and indeed Vietnam, which has seen about a fourfold increase in companies assembling Apple products over the past decade. Meanwhile, coming up, well, let's talk about global regulation for a moment. We're joined by the European Commissioner for Financial Services to discuss all things digital finance and regulation there, Ed.
I'm taking a quick look at shares of the Swedish company Ericsson. This is the Swedish shares, 2% higher as it stands. The US ADR is actually a little bit higher, even still, than that. Beat on earnings, and it's really interesting. This is a company going through restructuring at a time where the mobile phone or cell carriers are just not spending on 5G network infrastructure, but the market likes what it sees. Stock up 2%. This is Bloomberg Technology. Okay, the European Union's back in Silicon Valley, and this time the focus is payments, crypto, and the impact of artificial intelligence on banks. European Commissioner for Financial Services, Mairead McGuinness, has met with Coinbase and Plaid and has meetings lined up with Apple and Stripe. I'm delighted to say the Commissioner joins me now on set. Welcome.
Yeah, delighted to be here in person. It's been a while since I was this side of the country, so it's good to be with you.
It's interesting, the ongoing relationship between the Commission and Silicon Valley-based companies. You forget there are more than 400 million people in Europe who have access to those companies and their products. Just summarize the purpose of your visit and your objectives.
Well, it's always good to meet colleagues, and you can talk to them by phone, but being here in person matters. We're at a critical stage, so this Commission is coming towards the end of its mandate. There's been an awful lot of change around finance, digitalisation, we have artificial intelligence, and really we're here to exchange views and to listen to what's happening on the ground here, because it's a fast-moving area. Even since my taking up this role, we've seen a huge evolution in banking. COVID accelerated the use of digital payments. We want payments to be instant. We've got legislation around that. So basically what we're trying to do is harness the benefits of all of these technologies, but all the while looking at the risks that might be involved in them. And our idea is not to stifle innovation, and this is a place where innovation flourishes, so it's good just to exchange some...
We have a lot to discuss. I'd like to very quickly just tick off crypto. Coinbase were on the show with me last week, and they have a number of grievances, particularly about legislating for regulation instead of going through courts. What were the grievances they brought up to you in the context of Europe?
The grievance where it didn't arise, because actually they feel comfortable that Europe has provided certainty with our markets and crypto assets legislation. And while there might be minor issues within that, at least they know how they will be regulated and licensed at the European level. I think here it's different. So we were able to talk about the benefits of certainty. Very often Europe can be accused of being rules-based, which I think is actually a good accusation because rules matter, but sometimes over-regulating. I was very interested to hear how certainty is important for a company like Coinbase. And I was also interested that maybe a few years ago this was an area of concern. But actually when you listen to that company and its vision for what could come next in terms of innovation and how they believe regulation is important, I was very encouraged by that. So we didn't have so much of the grievances. I mean, there are issues that they will talk to us about, and we're very open to talking with and to those who are using our legislation and who need clarification.
Commissioner McGuinness, can I push back a little bit? Because I'm reading a report from Tether, for example, now nowhere near as much oversight as the previous business we were just talking about, but key player within stablecoins, the player in stablecoins, many would say, and they've gone on the record saying the message being sent is that Europe does not want crypto. Regulation is had that is largely limiting access, especially for retail investors. Brussels' effect, for many, feels like a cooling effect.
Well, look, everyone has a different opinion on this, and I think we had three options when it came to crypto. Ignore it and let things evolve, ban it because we couldn't control it, or, and this is the approach we have taken, regulate it so that those that are in the industry have certainty about when they're dealing with clients within the European Union. And I think we took the right course. Now, it's a fast-moving area, and equally, many who are in that space originally came to it because they didn't want to be in the regulated zone, if you like. But I do think there's more maturity now, that those who want to have a lifetime in this business, which will evolve over that time, want certainty in terms of their dealing in the European Union, and we have provided that certainty. And I think that's all to the good of the industry itself. It's, in one sense, AI has overtaken some of the conversations around crypto, because crypto has been around for some time. It looks like it will prevail. There are different views in Europe about whether crypto is an asset or not, and we have all of these conversations. What we do in the Commission is bear in mind, you know, the greater good. So is the balance of regulation better than allowing things evolve without any guardrails?
Let's talk about those guardrails for a moment, Commissioner. Apologies to jump in, but the AI guardrails, for example, the AI Act. How much do you think AI is a concern in terms of, well, financial stability right now?
Well, I mean, that's a very big question. I think the issue of AI...
We ask only big questions on this show,
it's such a big question that when you listen to some of the scary stories around AI, you would really want to stop it immediately. But it is not something that you can actually contain. What we can do is try and look in a measured way at what are the risks. Because not all AI is high risk. In fact, some of it is extremely useful. And again, our approach, and it sounds dull, but it's important to say it, it's about balance. Allow the industry evolve, but allow those who are, you know, if you like, in charge of watching these things, like the Commission and our Parliament, to have a say in how it evolves. And we want it to do good. So we, again, look at the risks involved rather than allow an unfettered evolution of artificial intelligence, which is already being used in the financial system in any event. I gather I have one who talks to me on my banking app. We get on sometimes, not all the time. And I think behind all of this is a desire to harness technology, but not remove the human dimension around technology. And I think there's a risk that could happen. So we've been mindful of all of these things, and we have been careful to categorize where the risks are. Conscious also that this will evolve. You know, it is evolving before our very eyes.
It is, Commissioner, and that's why you've got plenty of conversations to still be had. We wish we had longer with you. Mairead McGuinness, wonderful to have you on the show, European Commissioner for Financial Services.
Rivos is a Silicon Valley AI chip developer without a product on offer yet, but it's raised more than $250 million in an oversubscribed funding round, with Matrix Capital Management, the largest investor in the round, joining the board. Delighted to bring in Rivos CEO Puneet Kumar for more. This is an AI chip based on RISC-V architecture. I hear a lot about that at the moment as an alternative to NVIDIA, but let's go back to the idea that it is in design. You're in the R&D phase.
That's correct.
The $250 million, where does it get you?
Okay, so first of all, thank you for having me on the show. It's an honor to be here. What we plan to do with this fundraise that we are announcing today is to really primarily support our increasing customers. We have huge demand coming at us.
You increase customers if you haven't got anything to give them yet.
So we've been speaking with a lot of potential customers already, and they're very intrigued by our design, what we have to offer. And what we're going to do today is use this money that we have raised to expand our operations globally, increase our hiring, increase our engineering efforts, get to production of our parts, and really get to trials.
I hear increasingly there is a market for a RISC-V based AI accelerator or AI chip. It's a point of differentiation from NVIDIA and prior and for upcoming generations. But it doesn't seem like that market's here in America. No one's taking it seriously.
That's right.
Is it in China?
Actually, that's not true. It is here too. If you, in the last few days, you saw an announcement, for example, from one of the big AI drivers that they are using RISC-V in their chips already. So we definitely see a place for RISC-V in the AI market, and there's several companies in this market space already.
Puneet, for those who aren't as well versed in RISC-V versus ARM architecture, break down what alternative it offers. Is this about cost? Is this about ability, efficiency?
It's actually a combination of many factors. Cost is just saving in license fee, for example, rather than paying somebody else. But really the biggest thing, I think, is drives a lot of innovation because it's a brand new architecture. It's open. So that allows anybody to do research with that architecture. And this is where we kind of see innovation happening in the next 5 to 10 years. And it eventually, we think, will displace many of the other players in the market, the existing incumbents. This really is the Linux moment, we think. RISC-V brings a Linux moment to instruction set architectures for CPU designs.
Puneet, therefore, there is this hand-wringing going on about the access to AI infrastructure, a need for energy. We've talked a lot about just the teaming up of Microsoft and G42, the obvious global conversation going on around access to chips. Who would be your customer? Are you going after NVIDIA's customers, or are you going after ones that can't access NVIDIA?
Okay, so I think, first of all, we are going after any customer that is really using a lot of data. That's our biggest thing, is that any data-driven business that needs more hardware support is our potential customer. Now, we know that the big 3 or 4 players in the market, obviously NVIDIA is the biggest, there's AMD, there's Intel, and there's many other startups in the area that are building hardware for AI. We think the field is growing fast enough that we have ample opportunity to address any of the players who can't get access to NVIDIA hardware or who want to look for an alternative, whether it's cheaper, whether it's more power efficient. There's many factors that would go into the decision-making process.
You were associated with a company called PA Semi.
That's
that
correct.
company was sold to Apple.
Yes.
There has been a piece of legal proceeding or litigation that's now been settled, which came before this funding round. Could you just explain that and where we sit with it?
You know, what we're celebrating today is our fundraise. What we are really trying to do here is keep at our product. Yes, there was a litigation and it is behind us, but what we really are trying to do today is focus on our product going forward. We've been beavering away at this for about 3 years, laser focused on getting where we want to get to, and we really look forward to our product being announced in the next 6 months to a year.
Come back when the product's ready to show.
Absolutely.
All right.
We're delighted to.
Real CEO Puneet Kumar, thank you so much.
Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Caroline Hyde in New York.
And I'm Ed Ludlow in San Francisco. Markets, Caro.
Yeah, quick check on them, because we've seen perhaps a little bit more stability in the US that you've seen abroad. Certainly in the NASDAQ 100 actually managing to turn green at the moment. The benchmark seeing a little bit of inbound as we await Jay Powell speaking a little bit later. All important for the bond market, which has seen a sell-off earlier and 2-year yields near a 5% handle. But nevertheless, we see some money going back into big tech. MSCI All Country World Index, though, under pressure. Europe sold off hard. So did Asia, in fact, playing a little bit of catch-up to some of the risk aversion we've seen in the US. Bitcoin off by 1.3% as the US dollar just marches higher. What will we hear on the inflationary pressure from Chair Powell at 62,000 on Bitcoin versus the US dollar? Move over. Have a look at some of the individual names. Now, I said that Europe was under pressure. I start with a name over in the UK, Wise. TransferWise, and many would know it, basically sending money abroad. Down almost 9%. Look, revenue is up 24% for this particular fintech darling. I'm just speaking to the European Commissioner all around digital finance. But it was not as much as the market wanted to see, and we're under pressure significantly. Tesla off by more than 2%. You're reporting, Ed, front and center as they see executives lead and, of course, leave, and indeed potentially as much as 20% headcount and cuts in certain areas of the business. Netflix, though, your outperformer today. We brace ourselves for earnings at the end of the week. We're getting some upgrades to the price targets coming from various analysts today. We're at 620 for Netflix. But, Ed, what are you looking at on other earnings areas?
Well, banks are big this Tuesday. AI has been changing the game. I just want you to listen to a soundbite from PGIM CEO David Hunt, who joined us earlier. Here's what he said.
Technology now is allowing us to move data to the cloud and then to do things with artificial intelligence that we never could do before. And so it now is actually being used by our investors. It's actually being used by the front line to make decisions. That's a very different use of technology than it was before, and I think that's very exciting.
Let's bring in Bloomberg Sonali Basak, the key Wall Street name. Bank of America is what's moving in the markets, and PGIM's thoughts on the AI story in banks. Could have put it better than I ever could. Just summarize what's happening this Tuesday morning.
There are a few things happening at the same time. When you think about Bank of America, it is their propensity to bring new clients in, lend them money, and also keep a handle on costs. One thing being asked of CEO Brian Moynihan was if this further investment in digitization of the bank would help bring their efficiency ratio down below 60%. And you had CEO Brian Moynihan say they were really pushing to get that done. Now, some interesting statistics for you here, Ed. When you think about how quickly things are going digital, it's that this quarter alone, Zelle transactions at Bank of America passed the combined number of checks written plus the amount of cash withdrawals from tellers and from ATMs. So that is how quickly money is moving online at Bank of America. Now, the faster they can get this done, they believe that they would be able to create cost savings not just for themselves, but for their customers as well. That's one side of things, how the banks themselves are using digitization and AI to really drive efficiency. The other end of things here, I want to pull up a quote from David Solomon, Goldman Sachs' CEO, just a day ago, about how the significant demand for AI-related infrastructure and as a result financing would be a tailwind to their business. A day later, just today now, we have Morgan Stanley saying that it had the top amount in equity underwriting fees so far this year. The more that people are raising money in these markets, the more you can fuel some progress in terms of fee generation for these banks.
Isn't that fascinating? Because AI is almost a driver on both fronts. We've got the cost efficiency. We've also got the fact that anything with AI in its name is looking to go public at the moment, or indeed try and spin that story. How much resilience is there coming from some of these CEOs playing catch up ultimately to Jamie Dimon, who seems to have led the pack when it comes to AI?
Well, one thing that's interesting is you look at the bottom line here and you look at how much they're spending on technology. You have costs rising at every bank, particularly in terms of compensation, even with headcount falling. But for many of these banks, including Bank of America, Morgan Stanley, you're seeing technology really be on the rise as well when you look at the costs rising at these firms. So they are competing not just to invest in talent, but also to invest in the way of automating these banks as quickly as humanly possible, because at the end of the day, they believe it will help their bottom line.
Isn't it interesting, though, Bank of America having its worst day since, well, the Silicon Valley Bank collapse back in March 2023, which was all about money moving a bit too fast for everyone's pleasant relationships with it. Shonali Basak, we're pleased to have you on the show today to break down, AI and tech and banking. And let's stick with that, because over at Jefferies, annual private internet conference is on our shoulders. We've got Santa Monica is where it's being held. 500 tech leaders are going to be meeting to discuss, guess what, AI, emerging opportunities in the next cycle of the growth in tech. Gaurav Kitter is with us. He's Jefferies Global Co-Head of Internet Investment Banking, joining us. And Gaurav, congratulations on the event that's coming today. What is front of mind from the private allocation of money right now? Is it trying to pick the winners in this environment?
Sure. Firstly, thank you for having me, and thank you for covering our event over the next couple of days. What we have here this week is a collection, as you mentioned, of about 400 to 500 company execs as well as investors in tech and in consumer tech in particular. This year we have a theme around AI, as you've been talking about, and it's hard to not get excited about what the prospects are from an AI perspective, especially in private company land. I think there's two elements to this that we are looking for this week. One is the AI first companies. So think about companies that are trying to disrupt existing monopolies, existing large industries, whether that be everything from financial services to nursing to the search and so on and so forth. There's a whole universe of those companies. And then you've got the large consumer internet companies that are using AI today in their business, both from the perspective of new services as well as from taking out costs. And so that will be a big theme across both of those sectors.
Do you expect M&A to be driven by this AI wave?
Not in a meaningful way yet. And what I mean by that is at least a lot of the companies that we have here right now are still relatively early in their evolution. Yes, there is a lot of hype. Yes, they are getting a lot of investment from early stage and late stage investors, but they're still early in where they sit in the revenue profile of their companies, in the maturation of business models. And so I think everyone is monitoring it. I've talked to several large company executives that are here that are doing meetings with some of these companies that are monitoring how this is going to impact their own business. But I think acquiring something is hard. These trade high valuations, as you noted, and acquiring for a big company to acquire something for billions of dollars when it's not really generating meaningful revenue, I think it's going to be really hard. So I don't think it's going to be a big M&A team from that perspective. I think it's going to be a big investment team today. And by the way, these companies can get very big very quickly. I think that's the one thing to look out for. There's not been as interesting of a time in consumer tech in particular as there is today, because a lot of the companies that are in the room today could be breakout companies in the next 1 to 2 to 3 years, right? These could be household names very, very quickly.
Yeah, Gaurav, it's the same in the IPO market. September or the little Reddit pop of late, you needed to have an AI story. You called them frontline AI names, or names that needed an AI story even if they had nothing to do with AI. What I'm interested from you is, in attendance this week, what's the proportion of what you'd call genuine AI companies, builders of large language models, versus those that just know in the shop window they need the letters A and I to get some funding?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say probably about 25-30% of the companies that are here are what I would say AI first businesses. So, we have, companies like Perplexity and Glean and Anthropic and Duckbill and 11 Labs and so on and so forth, Quora with PoAI, et cetera. So, AI first companies, that's probably about 25-30% of it. For the rest, though, this team is so front and center. I'll give you examples. We've got a number of companies in travel tech, large businesses like, Hopper and a company out of Korea, Yanolja, and so on and so forth. They're going to talk about how AI is transforming their business. So it is not you're right that it's a little bit, they have to talk about it, but in many cases it is truly what is driving their business. Similarly, we'll have, companies on the music side and companies in fintech and in health tech. And this will be a big team across all of those as well.
Gaurav Couture, Jefferies Global Co-Head of Internet Investment Banking. And Caro, he mentioned one of those names that's coming up.
Yeah, cannot wait to bring you all the highlights from the Jefferies conference. We're going to be joined by the CEO of Perplexity. That's coming up next. Meanwhile, let's just go back to the public markets for a moment, because we're also keeping a close eye on Live Nation. The Justice Department may file an antitrust complaint as soon as next month, aimed at forcing Live Nation to spin off its Ticketmaster ticketing business. The power of Taylor Swift. We're down by 6.8%. This is Bloomberg Technology.
Time for Talking Tech. First up, Google DeepMind CEO Demis Hassabis says the company will spend more than $100 billion over time developing AI technology. The comment comes as Hassabis was asked at an event in Vancouver about a potential $100 billion supercomputer dubbed Stargate, which is being planned by Microsoft and OpenAI, which was reported in the information last month. Plus, Crypto.com is in the middle of a hiring drive that could see its headcount grow by a total of 1,400 people. It's the latest sign of an improved employment outlook in the sector. Now remember, Crypto.com cut a fifth of its staff in early 2023 to control costs following a market rout. The firm began hiring again. Tokens, including Bitcoin, rallied. Rivals such as Coinbase, Kraken and Binance have also been adding to their staff. And Meta's oversight board is investigating the company's handling of AI-generated deepfakes. Earlier this year, sexually explicit deepfake images of Taylor Swift flooded Facebook and other social platforms, prompting an outcry from the White House, AI experts and other advocacy groups. According to a statement made by the board, it will evaluate whether two separate AI-created images depicting nude women posted on Facebook should have been removed under Meta's content policies. Caroline.
Now I want to focus a bit more on some of Meta's business models and indeed what's been happening with our big take today. In the age of social media, it's very easy, Ed, to be deceived, but the latest scam is proving to be deadly. It's exploiting the shame and embarrassment of teenage boys. Joining us now, Bloomberg's Olivia Carville, and I'm not ashamed to say that I cried several times reading the story on the train this morning. What Business Week and what your reporting does so well so often is you shine a light on a few key individual stories. You make the story real. Jordan Demay is one of them. Can you just articulate what happened to him and ultimately how many more numbers of people this was happening to?
Jordan Demay fell victim to what is known as a sextortion scam. This is sexual extortion. Essentially, he was contacted by what he thought was a teenage girl on Instagram, and she turned the conversation flirtatious. She sent him a naked photo of herself and asked for one in return. When Jordan complied and sent a nude photo back to this individual through Instagram, immediately he was blackmailed for money. So what actually unfolded and what he had no idea of is that who was behind that account was actually con men or scammers based in Lagos, Nigeria, who had been contacting hundreds of teen boys across the US, reaching out to them to try and elicit a nude photo from them to then blackmail them. This crime, sextortion, is now the fastest growing crime in the US. The FBI has been sending out PSAs because sadly it's resulted in the suicide of more than 24 teen boys, including Jordan Demay.
And a guilty plea coming from two very young boys themselves, ultimately, and just adults in Lagos who are now here in the US. Snap did respond to your reporting, saying they're ramping up our tools to combat sextortion, and we have extra safeguards for teens to protect against unwanted contact. And indeed, Meta's global head of safety you've been speaking to, saying that sextortion is a horrific crime, and we spent years building technology to combat it and support law enforcement in investigating and prosecuting the criminals behind it. But ultimately, you're saying this is still growing. What more stories are you hearing, or indeed ways in which is it technology that ends up being able to be a force against this?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, for the social media platforms, they don't want this occurring. You know, these individuals, these bad actors are hacking into Instagram accounts to pretend to be these teen girls in order to coerce these nude photos. So for the platforms, it becomes, how do we prevent this from the outset? So they're using artificial intelligence to do things like suspect or detect suspicious activity on the platform. Meta is now sending sextortion-focused safety notices to teens, saying, you know, this is what sextortion is, be wary, be careful of who you're talking to. And just last week, they announced that they're going to be automatically blurring nude images that are sent through the platform. So all of these steps are being taken in an effort to try and curb this crime. But from the FBI's perspective and law enforcement perspective, it's just growing too big, it's moving too fast, and the scammers are too ruthless in how they blackmail the teens. They push them to the edge and beyond to try and get as much money as they possibly can from these young boys.
Olivia, this is the latest in a series of investigations you've done across quite a broad domain of AI-generated content on social media, deepfake pornography, and now this piece. You talked about the efforts there, but also the challenges. Is there one outcome from your investigation since publishing the story that you can talk about? Anything that happened in response to your reporting?
Well, I was surprised to see Meta announce just last week that they're going to be blurring nude images sent through the platform. I think that is a great step in the right direction. And you're right, I tend to focus these stories on, you know, the dark sides of social media, and there's obviously so much good that social media gives to children and young people as well. These are the edge cases, and I think it's really important for our viewers and our readers to know about the risks of social media, and specifically in this story, for young teen boys to understand maybe the person that you're messaging isn't actually who they say they are. Maybe you need to be more cautious about how you behave on social media, what you put out there to the public, and, you know, how you talk to individuals who are ultimately strangers, people you don't know.
I urge everyone out there to go read your reporting and indeed the implications of it. Olivia Carville, thank you so much for spending time with us today to talk through it.
Let's get back to the Jefferies Private Internet Conference. One major theme, the theme, is AI. Perplexity CEO Aravind Srinivas is joining us now from that conference. And Perplexity, of course, the developer of an AI-based search engine platform. And I hear the name Perplexity a lot. I know a lot of people use Perplexity and a lot of people talk about Perplexity. Why are you at Jefferies? What do you want to get out of it this week?
I'm excited to meet people here. And, Perplexity is still not a household name yet. I want it to be used by every person, every organization. And it always helps to spread awareness and get more people excited about Perplexity.
There have been reports that you are now a $1 billion valued startup. There is a lot of interest in your capability. Talk to us about the financial health of Perplexity right now.
I think what we announced was, when I was there last time here with you, the Jeff Bezos around $520 million valuation. We haven't made an official announcement on a new round yet. We'll have more to share soon, very shortly.
Oh, come back, talk to us about that. For now, what strides are you making? Are people switching from, say, Google as a search engine to you? What do your customers say, Aravind?
What they say is they're not viewing us as oh, I either use you or Google. They're still happy to use Google for quickly getting onto a website. Say they just want to go to Bloomberg.com. They're just happy to use Google for that. But let's say they want to know what is the latest thing going on at Jefferies, or who are the speakers at this conference that I should be aware of for my business. These sort of things are what Perplexity is more useful for. So they are beginning to see us as a different tool and answer engine that's very useful for directly coming and asking questions and doing your research. And our growth in the United States, ever since we announced the funding round last time, along with you guys, has been really good. And that's also translated a lot to growing our revenue, because we always wanted to be a tool that's used by people in the high income countries.
Yeah.
And that's beginning to show up in our numbers too.
What about your business model? There's a lot of interesting talk of how, Google itself might start charging for its AI offerings within its enterprise. Are you seeing enterprise adoption for you? And are you thinking about charging?
Definitely we are considering it. And that'll be something we'll be sharing soon, something more on that. And the way I see it is a lot of companies, a lot of people tell me that, I wish I can use Perplexity at work, but my company has banned it.
Yes.
So that's a problem to solve, and we're going to work on that.
Aravind, what's the challenge right now for a company that is building LLMs and working at this level? What is your day-to-day that you're facing?
I mean, the biggest challenge is honestly the pace at which this field keeps changing every week, right? One point we were all GPT-4 is the model, and it's there's nothing else that matters. And everyone was oh, you cannot build on top of them because they're eventually going to do all the product, and it doesn't matter. There's no independence from OpenAI. And then Anthropic puts out Claude 3. And then Claude 3 is even better than GPT-4, at least the Opus model. And there are models much better than 3.5.
Yeah.
It's cheaper, faster. Open source is moving fast. Databricks released a model that's better than 3.5. Mistral keeps releasing new models.
It's just the pace. And the pace of the show went too fast as well. We wish we had time with you. Aravind Srinivas, Perplexity CEO. Wonderful to have his thoughts. This is Bloomberg Technology.